Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to today's WIRED Foresight briefing. I'm Greg Williams. I'm the editor of WIRED. Welcome along to today's expert briefing. This is the latest in a series of conversations with leading figures and innovative thinkers in business, science, technology, academia, and policy to really investigate the changes that the coronavirus crisis has brought upon us, to explore how the world will change in the coming months and years, and most importantly, to understand how we can prepare for those changes. We intend these live virtual briefings are punchy, top-class sessions with a guest speaker on a key topic or theme. Each starts with a brief introduction from the speaker, goes into a discussion with the WIRED editor, and is followed by a Q&A session featuring your questions. We know you're busy, we know you want concise, authoritative briefings, so these sessions will last roughly 25 minutes. Couple of housekeeping points. You can submit your questions through this session by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. After our discussion, we'll pick 3 questions from the audience to answer live. And as with all of WIRED's virtual briefings, the session is produced by WIRED events team. They'll be backstage for most of it, but in case you see their name pop up when they're sharing slides and images, they are real people and not bots, I assure you. Finally, this session is being recorded and we will gladly send you a copy of the link after the event ends. Now on to the session. Over the last decade, the rise of the gig economy and dramatic development of the startup ecosystem have drastically shifted our concept of a career. We've moved from the more traditional linear idea of a corporate ladder to a more flexible and fluid journey across roles and industries. And this has meant that we're seeing a shift in skill sets, we're seeing a shift in expectations and priorities emerging within a new kind of workforce. And this change has created a tension between traditional employers who can come across today as outmoded and a new type of employee who has very different needs and priorities to employees of the past. With millions of people working remotely due to the current health crisis, companies and employees alike are facing a stress test of their technology, their strategy, their workforce durability, and their business models. Today, we'll explore how our work lives are transforming and how the coronavirus pandemic will change the way we work. With that, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest speakers, Sarah Ellis and Helen Tupper, co-authors of the Squiggly Career, which encourages readers to design their own work life. Helen's held leadership roles at Microsoft, Virgin and BP, and is now CEO of the consultancy Amazing If. She's also a trustee for the Working Families Charity and a fellow of the RSA. Sarah has led marketing and corporate responsibility teams for Barclays and Sainsbury's before becoming MD of a creative agency. She's now the Chief Learning Officer at Amazing If. Sarah is also the co-chair of the Mayor of London's Workspace Advisory Board. Sarah and Helen, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. If we could just start things off by you giving us a quick overview of your work, please.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you both for joining, and thank you to WIRED and Greg for inviting us to talk to you all today. I'm going to start by just sharing my screen. So I'm just going to we're going to have a very quick intermission because today we really want to share our key ideas with you and kind of visualize them. And so hopefully that's come up for you okay. And so what we want to do is just, as Greg just described, talk to you a bit about what do we mean by the changes that we're seeing in careers today and what are the implications of those changes. I think lots of us would recognise this career ladder analogy. Certainly when I started my career, this is what I thought the job to be done was, that it was all very hierarchical, linear, quite simple and straightforward in some ways, in that you often knew what the kind of next step was and kind of where you were heading. And, you know, perhaps even an expectation that, you know, the higher you got, the more successful or kind of the better your progress. And that maybe there was some sort of incredible nirvana moment waiting for us when we got to the top of that ladder. I think most of us would now recognise that our realities are becoming much more squiggly. And what we mean by squiggly is that the number of transitions that we're all experiencing in our careers, the frequency of those transitions, the regularity, the number of those transitions are all increasing. Most of us will have on average 4 to 5 different types of career. Almost every aspect of how we work and our careers has now changed. Prior to sort of 8 or 9 weeks ago, only 6% of the UK actually worked a 9 to 5 day. Now I'm not even sure anyone knows what hours they're working, as all of our boundaries have become blurred. And certainly I've got a 3-year-old toddler downstairs, and everything I think has changed simultaneously. And this squiggly career is our reality. It both offers us the opportunity, I think, for more fulfillment and creativity, and with work being such a big part of our identity and meaning so much to us all, it's potentially quite a hopeful place to be. But I think simultaneously, and particularly with events over the last 8 weeks, there's also more potential for stress, overwhelm, and anxiety. And actually thinking about how do we make this squiggly career work for us does require a shift in our thinking and certainly our employers' thinking as well. Let's talk briefly about what the problem to be solved is. So too often, I think what we still see is what we would kind of describe as hierarchical command and control thinking. And particularly when it comes to career development, often it is still the reserves of the few, and it is not made available to many. And it's often still delivered in a way that doesn't reflect the kind of reality of our sort of day-to-day lives. Training is often still perceived to be going on a course. And actually, we really need to think about how we define what it means to learn. In a kind of more abstract sense, I think this quote is a useful thing to reflect on briefly before I then talk about maybe what this means in practical reality. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I think this idea of learning, unlearning, and relearning is really critical. So what do we kind of think the solution is? What do the things that we've seen have worked really well with organisations? I think there are 2 aspects that are particularly important for us all to be reflecting on. One is around mindset, and the other is around skill set. I'm really now trying to, I think the way that we describe it is democratise career development. We all now need the right mindset and skill set to succeed in a squiggly career. I really like how Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, describes this. He sort of puts this all together and sort of says we all now need to be what he describes as learn-it-alls. Learning almost needs to become the job. Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, talks about when he recruits, the first thing he looks for is somebody an intense learner? And I'm sure we'll kind of go on now with Greg to talk a bit about, you know, things like resilience, adaptability. The bit that we're really passionate about is how do we really help people in a very kind of practical, useful day-to-day way get the mindset and the skill set that we all need to kind of make these squiggly careers work for us, despite or kind of as part of the ambiguity, change, and certainty that we are definitely all going to experience kind of over the next 12 to 18 months. With that, I'll stop sharing and hand back over to Greg, and I'm sure we'll get into some questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing that. You guys, I mean, it's such a crucial area at the moment. Everyone is thinking about work, everyone's thinking about careers and how that's going to shift over the coming months and how things will be impacted by the crisis that we're in at the moment. First question, do you think that careers are going to become ever more squiggly because of this? And what types of trends do you think we're going to be seeing because of that?
Hi, Greg. Yeah, we do think that careers are going to be more squiggly. I mean, for a lot of people, they already were squiggly. One of the things that we often hear people talking about is the future of work. And we're like, no, this is here now. These changes are happening. Our organisations were already responding to, a significant pace of change. So we would say, yeah, they are squiggly right now for the majority of people, and they are likely to get squigglier because particularly over the next 12 months, organisations are going to have to keep adapting, keep changing as everything is changing around us. In terms of some of the trends, two of the biggest trends that we see at the moment, the first is the need for individualised learning. So there isn't this, because there's not a one-size-fits-all career anymore, there isn't a one-size-fits-all learning opportunity. People want learning on demand, just like they can do that outside of work. They consume things on demand. They want to have learning packaged in lots of different ways when they need it available for them. So it's not about, as Sarah said, it's not about people going on a course and sending 50 people on the same course. It's about giving people bite-sized learning opportunities that's available for them when they want it. So that's the piece about individuals, that's their expectation, because it's their experience outside of work. And one of the big trends that we see with employers is more of a focus on employee lifetime value rather than just the value they have today. So, a lot of employers would have thought, well, how long is this person going to work for me? And therefore, how much am I going to invest in them when they're in my company? But the reality is that people now, there's something called boomerang employees. So more people are going back into their organisation. Their advocacy has more impact now because they're connected in more places. And so what employers need to think about is, what's the lifetime value of this employee? Are they going to recommend me to other people? Are they going to write and share about their experiences of working for me and working in my business? And when you think about an employee like that, you start to see that actually developing them when they're with you, staying connected to them when they're not with you anymore, is all part of how they really become, a long-term advocate for your business.
That makes a lot of sense. You write in the book a lot about the importance of identifying values. I think most people probably have a sense of what's important to them, but they might not understand how they translate that into their career or into their working lives. How do you advise people to do that?
So in terms of your values, our definition of values is, values are what makes you you. They're what motivates and drives you. We all have them, and we don't have work values and home values. We just have those sets of things. And obviously it can sound like this, big ethereal concept, but it's actually quite practical. So the first thing that we say to people is, when you have that insight into what's most important to you, what motivates and drives you, don't wait until you're unhappy before you think about them. It's quite a lot of people will do is they'll be like, I'm happy, I don't need to spend time on my development, I'll just do it when I'm not happy. Well, actually, we want to think regularly about what's motivating and driving you at work and how we can have more of it. So the first thing we do is say, treat them a bit like a career compass, all right? To get really, really practical. If I think about the things that are most important to me at work, so my kind of primary values are freedom, growth, energy, and achievement, what I will do is I will regularly reflect, but literally scoring them out of 10 about the extent to which I'm fulfilled in my job at the moment on those different dimensions. And then it's, I might say, achievement at the moment, I'd give a 6 out of 10. So for me, that's kind of where I've got a little bit of a gap at the moment. And I would think about, what are all the small things that I could do to give me more achievement? So we're not waiting for kind of these big highs and lows in our careers of everything's amazing and it's not, so I'm going to think about my value. It's much more of a constant. You use your values as a constant way to feel engaged in your work. You can also use them as a filter for your future decisions. So if I'm looking at different career possibilities, sometimes we talk about the allure of shiny objects. So this is it's sort of like a hangover from staircase-like careers, to be honest. The status, the salaries, the job titles, they're all very shiny. But if we base our career decisions on those, they don't tend to last for meaningful fulfillment. They tarnish pretty quickly. So using your values as a filter for your decisions, if you're faced with multiple possibilities, can help you to make decisions that are more likely to make you happy. And the last thing, as a practical way of using them, is using them to build relationships. So Greg, for example, if I knew that one of your values was curiosity, and you were asking me lots of questions all the time, then if I didn't know that was your value, I might think, why is Greg asking me all these questions. It gets a bit irritating. But if I knew that your value was curiosity, then I know that's just how you think about the world. That's what's important to you. You want to ask the questions, you want to unlock insights. And so it helps me to be more intrigued than irritated, perhaps.
And I think
not that I ever would be.
One point I would just add there, Greg, that I'm seeing that I do think concerns me sometimes around careers is I think comparison culture in terms of careers is live and well. You know, through social media, you know, we often, as Helen talked about, we kind of post about the shiny stuff. Mm-hmm. And I do think because work now plays such a pivotal role in our lives, it also means there's more pressure. Mm-hmm. And I think people feel that pressure in terms of, do I have enough purpose in my job? Do I have enough meaning? Am I doing the right things? Am I doing what I should do, what I could do? And I think what values help you to have is the confidence that you're doing the right thing for you versus what you think you should do, could do, what other people are doing. And it helps us to just kind of step away from all of that external pressure, which I think it's so hard to not let that in. You know, it's so hard to kind of just stay focused and run our own race is often how we kind of describe it. And I do think using your values as a compass gives you confidence.
So just talking about that external pressure for a moment, clearly there's a lot of challenges at the moment that people are feeling, particularly if they're working remotely, or maybe they have to attend a workplace still. You know, things have changed to a huge extent, and we're thinking about qualities like resilience, we're thinking about qualities like adaptability. Now, is it possible to maybe develop those qualities? And if so, how would you advise people to sort of work on those kinds of things?
So the good news is yes, very much so. They're both skills. Perhaps if I talk to resilience and Sarah, maybe you talk to adaptability. So yeah, resilience is vital. It's really vital. And the squigglier our careers get, our ability to be able to move through them with resilience is very, very important. It's why we talk about owning your career development, because if you outsource that entirely to your company, that can make you quite vulnerable when all this change is happening. There are 3 ways that we help people to develop their resilience at work. The first thing is something that we call caging your confidence gremlins. So your confidence gremlins are the thoughts and assumptions that get in your way. They hold you back from doing the things that you want to do. So maybe it's, I don't know enough. I'm going to get found out. I'm not good at, I'm not good at numbers. I'm scared of senior people. I'm afraid of conflict. I mean, I could list them all day, and I have many of them, Greg. But the thing with our confidence gremlins is they're very often unproven. They're very often assumptions. It's like an internal narrative that we have somehow made true in our heads. And so the first thing we've got to do is we sort of got to let the confidence gremlins out of their cages where they've just been, on autopilot in our heads. And we've got to really acknowledge them and see how they're holding us back. So maybe if I've got a fear of not knowing enough, it means I don't ask questions. Or if I've got a fear of conflict, it means I never stop and challenge someone when I think that what they're doing might not be right for the business. So you've got to be able to kind of let them loose a little bit and see how they're holding you back. And then there are lots of practical ways that you can start to cage your confidence gremlins, test the assumptions that you're making, make small steps towards them, start to reframe some of your limiting beliefs into limitless beliefs. We have lots of ways that we help people to cage. Very difficult to kill a gremlin. It's always going to be there a little bit, but we want to stop it holding you back. So that's the first thing. The second thing we do to help people with their resilience is get them to think about their support systems. So I will be more resilient if I have a strong support system. If there are people that I give support to, it gives me confidence that I've got something of worth to give to people. And if I've got people that I get support from, then when things feel tough, or when I need some perspective, or when I need someone to really pick me up and give me a bit of a boost, I know who those people are and I know that I can go to them. And the last thing's about success. So if you really stick to your failures, it doesn't help you to be resilient. What we want you to do is be aware of all your successes and not just the one amazing thing you've done in 2020, but the brilliant thing you did yesterday. The really great thing you've done this week. If we can start to create a habit of reflecting on all of the small successes, it can help us to see all the little ways we add value, and it gives us the confidence to keep going when things might be hard. So that's a lot of the work that we do around resilience. And Sarah, maybe if you could talk to some of the points on adaptability.
Yeah, I'll keep it short because I know we want to get some Q&A from people dialing in. On adaptability, firstly, we are all more adaptable than I think we give ourselves credit for. And I think probably the last period of time has shown us all that. So we should feel confident that we can adapt because we've been forced into it. It's been outside of our control, and people are adapting brilliantly and creatively and innovatively. So that's good. If you only watch one TED Talk on adaptability, Natalie Freitos is a very short TED Talk, and she talks really specifically about how she looks for adaptability in the startups that she invests in. So that's worth taking your time to do. There are two things that I think specifically you can think about for yourselves around how adaptable are you. Is firstly, how often are you kind of experimenting? How often are you trying stuff out? How comfortable are you with kind of making mistakes and learning from them? A professor at London Business School once said to me, Sarah, as a leader, every month you should be asking yourself, how many mistakes did I make and what did I learn? And the answer to that shouldn't be zero. Yeah, so we've got to be experimenting. Margaret Heffernan talks about it as prototyping the future that we want to create. And I think that point about experimenting, being curious, having an exploring mindset is a really important one when we think about adaptability. The other one is about scenario planning, kind of what if thinking, and actually our ability to prioritize and to spend time thinking about possible futures, whether that's for yourself, so you're thinking about your own career possibilities and the interesting diverse range of things that you could do, or whether that's for your business or for your industry. But people who are more adaptable are people who spend time doing that, who spend time thinking about the future and hypothesizing and almost playing with those possibilities and thinking, what if? So if this thing happened, what might I do? What might that mean for the skills that I've got to offer? What might that mean for our industry? And I would suggest there's probably never a better time to be doing a bit of that right now.
Great. We've got just a few more minutes, and I do want to get some Q&As in, but I've got a couple more questions, and then we'll move on to Q&A if that's okay. So many people watching are either going to be working for large organizations, or maybe they're entrepreneurs, they work for themselves. It's quite hard when you're remote working to kind of create that distinction between work and everything else. Many people I'm talking to say it's very blurred for people. How can people put boundaries in place, and how best to police that?
So in terms of the boundaries, there are a number of different boundaries for people to think about. It's such a big word. I think first of all, there's the one that we often talk about, which is sort of like the time boundaries. And I think that's a lot about defining them and sharing them. Like, don't keep your boundaries to yourself. You've kind of got to get some boundary buy-in in order for you to help stick to them. So make sure that you're clear on what those are, and make sure you share them with the people that can that you need to buy into your boundaries. That might be your manager, it might be your partner, it might be friends, the people that might distract you from your boundaries. So that's the first one. The other types of boundaries that are worth thinking about are emotional boundaries. So some people will spend a lot of time supporting others, for example, or they'll spend a lot of time listening, and they'll find that it almost gives more to other people than they give to themselves. And it's really important to be aware of your emotional boundaries. Who are the people that give you energy? How much do you give to other people? But how much do you also keep for yourself? That's definitely something to be aware of. And I think one of the last things about your own health boundaries, whether that's your mental health, whether it's about your physical health, there are lots of things for you to think about. How much sleep do you get? Think about what are your health boundaries, and we all have that will look different for all of us. But if you can spend some time thinking about, what are those three types of boundaries that I need in terms of my time, my emotions, and my health, get some boundary buy-in, and also maybe get what we sometimes talk about as a boundary buddy, somebody that can help you, maybe hold you to account with your boundaries a little bit, so that they can sort of bring you back in if you start to move beyond them.
That's great. Maybe, Sarah, you could take this final question. So many of us have been working for home pretty effectively for the past several weeks. Remote working seems to be working for most organizations. How do you think, and I'm talking specifically about, relatively, large companies and medium-sized companies, how do you think things are going to play out over the coming months and years? How many of these changes that we've experienced, how many are going to stick? And what's going to be different when eventually people do return to their workplaces?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone knows the full answer to that, but I think what is interesting is we are already hearing from some of the leaders that we work with that their colleagues and their employees are already asking that question, already talking about some of this is working for me. I appreciate there's a lot that perhaps we wouldn't choose about how we all work right now, but there are parts where people are thinking, actually, some of this is good. I've learned to work in a different way. I'm perhaps more effective, more productive, and I'm kind of making this work. And so I do think I think most leaders I know are already starting to think about what are the implications for when there is a possibility for perhaps people to be physically back together again, because I don't think everyone will choose to work in the way that they did previously. I always think of it at the moment a little bit like it's kind of a rubber band, in that I think all organisations have been stretched in a kind of new or unanticipated way. But what I don't think will happen is everyone will go back to the shape they were before. I think we will all return and will be moulded in a new way. And I think that requires us to be really open about what that looks like. The key thing, I think, for me, that I really want to see leaders do is to involve people in what that looks like. So, and I think that's the right thing to do at the moment, and it's a really compelling thing to do, is actually talk to people about, no one person has all of the answers. No one has a monopoly on wisdom. Involve the people who are living and breathing this day to day, who have all adapted often so well and even better than we could have imagined, to kind of say, what could this look like? What should this look like? We just talked about the importance of adaptability. We know that it's kind of the number one skill that HR directors are talking about that they want from people. And we talked about the importance of experimentation. Give all of your people the opportunity to put that into practice and to help create what the kind of the next iteration of the organization looks like, rather than, I think, feeling like you have to have all of the answers. And it's such I think the tendency is to feel like you need to do that, and that's part of your job. But I think the braver thing is to involve people in that, and to recognize and understand that there's never going to be a one size fits all. What I hope is that this does give the opportunity for more difference in terms of different types and styles of working, different people perhaps being able to come back to work who perhaps didn't feel like it was accessible to them previously, because you can work in new and different ways. You perhaps don't need to have the long commutes, perhaps don't need to work the same hours. So I am hopeful, and I think I'm a natural optimist in that I think if this is thought about creatively and in an involving way, we could get to a really good place.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of organisations having those conversations. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see where that rubber band ends up when we're through this. So guys, we've got a couple more minutes. So if you've got time to maybe take a couple of the questions. I don't know if Helen, if you had a chance to look at the Q&A.
Sarah, I'm going to ask you this question. I'll field the Q and you do the A. So a couple of people have asked about how do I make, basically it's about transitions basically. So particularly if people feel like they're going from a staircase career, maybe a specialist skill set, and they almost want to try on Squiggly, what ways can they make the transition between the two?
The first thing I would encourage you to think about if you're thinking about making that transition is to start with your strengths. Even if you have had a linear career, and both Helen and I started off very kind of staircase-like, you will have lots of strengths to offer in a new environment, in a new context. Perhaps you're looking to change industry, perhaps you're looking to work in a different way. And I sometimes think we see first all the things that we haven't got, and all of perhaps the things that we've not done. And, we often don't give ourselves credit for the strengths and the things, the value that we can add. So please don't feel that if you've come from that staircase-like career, you can't make that transition. Start with your strengths, be confident about what you can add. The second thing I would say is try and be really exploring in terms of what you might want to do, rather than feeling like you've got to leap straight away into kind of the new thing. I think now it's easier than ever to get a bit of a sense for what is it like to work in that industry, to connect with people, to kind of delve into those worlds. Because I think the reason we explore possibilities is sometimes to realise they're not right for us. And that's okay too. So if you had imagined, you thought, I think I want to do this thing, and I've had that in my career a few times where I've thought, I remember at one point thinking, I think I really want to make TV ads. And I remember going and understanding that world a little bit more and realising, actually, I wouldn't be a good fit for that. I wouldn't be a good fit for that role. My strengths are not well aligned to what you need to be really good at making TV ads when you're working in a big brand. And so don't be afraid to do lots of exploring. Don't be afraid to discount some possibilities. And don't be afraid to kind of ask for help. We always say, for every possibility that you've got in mind, think about what do you need to learn and who can help you. And for every person who helps you, ask them for a recommendation for someone else who could help you too. And it's a really good chain reaction.
So I have another one for you. Please don't I feel like I've turned into a Greg for you, Sarah.
Yeah,
that's okay.
How do Squiggly Career principles apply to those who are freelance? And I was thinking in particular strengths, and making sure people's strengths stand out is important here.
Yeah, I think it's a hard time to be freelance at the moment. I think for people where you've already got an unpredictable life, you often, there's a difference between it being squiggly and knotty. And I think if you're freelance right now, definitely be really clear on your strengths, but also be I think open to being creative about how you might use those strengths. Look for who needs what you have to give. I always think with any job opportunity or any transition, you're thinking about the give and the gain. Think about what are you hoping to gain and what is it that you can give, and try and connect those things together. A really good practical question to ask yourself, I think, in any role or any transition is, how can I be useful? And if you can answer that question, then actually you can have some really good conversations about exploring, how could I be useful in a new way, in a new context? So I think just think about that. Start with how can I be useful is a good place to start. Do you want me to ask you a question now, Helen?
Go on, if you want to
scan. I thought I spotted earlier on, I thought it was a really good question I think it was from Barry, who said, if learning is the job, do organisations need to make time and kind of prioritise that for their people?
Barry, that's a brilliant question. The easier answer is yes, but perhaps I should just expand on that a little bit more. So yes, we do think that organisations should be creating the space and to some extent giving people permission to learn. I think it's partly on the employer to create that space and give permission, but it's also a lot on the individual with how they frame learning. So it isn't just going on a course. One of the things that we talk about is sort of like a 3E plan that might be helpful for you. So instead of thinking about learning as going on a course, first of all, think about the learning that you can get through experience, on the job experience, side projects. That should account for 50% of your learning. So if you've got a learning objective, think about 50% should be hands-on engagement with something to get experience-based learning. The second thing to think about is exposure. What or who do you need to be exposed to help you to learn? That could be people, it could be networks, maybe you need some different mentors, all of those things. And the last thing is about education. That's again, 25% of your time will be spent in terms of the education. That doesn't just have to be going on an expensive course, though that could form part of that. The amazing thing about the world that we work in now is that to some extent you can curate your curriculum for yourself. That can be, books, it can be podcasts, it can be watching things like this at Wired, it can be watching TED Talks. If you're clear on your kind of learning objective and you take those 3 E's, you start to get to an opportunity where you can own your learning and it's less dependent on your employer. Yes, we advocate them giving you time and permission, but don't let that hold you back. Start with, what do I want to learn and how can I learn it first?
Guys, thank you so much. Sarah and Helen, I thought it was just such a great timely discussion to have. I think everyone out there at the moment is thinking about these kinds of challenges and the ways that we can go back to work and the way that we can develop ourselves. So it was terrific to hear your thoughts. We will all work on caging our confidence gremlins and finding our boundary buddies. Thank you to everyone out there who joined us today. We will email you a link to the recording, and that will have more information on Sarah and Helen's book, The Squiggly Career, which is available right now from all good retail outlets. If you enjoyed today, please do check out the rest of the WIRED Foresight series. We have a number of candid discussions with economist Rebecca Henderson, trust expert Rachel Botsman, and the world's most watched virtual surgeon Shafi Ahmed, talking about the future of healthcare, available at wired.co.uk. In the meantime, stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.